All right, let's dive into something pretty mind-bending today. Picture this. What if everything in the universe, every little thing, was already decided, like a giant clock just ticking along?
It's a wild thought, right? That the universe might not be this random collection of events, but more like a perfectly choreographed dance.
Exactly. And that's what we're exploring in this deep dive, this idea of a deterministic universe. But where do we even begin with something so huge?
Well, a good place to start is with this concept of deterministic entropy. It's this idea that information, energy, and entropy, these fundamental aspects of the universe, are all woven together in this intricate way.
Okay, break that down for me a bit. What does that actually mean, these things being woven together?
Basically, every single event, no matter how tiny, leaves its own little mark on the universe, like a fingerprint.
Yeah.
And all these fingerprints together create this tapestry of cause and effect that stretches across all of space-time.
So it's like saying the universe never really forgets anything. Every action, every interaction, it all leaves a trace.
Exactly. And those traces, all that information, it's not just sitting there passively. It's shaping how everything unfolds, how energy flows, how systems evolve. That's the essence of deterministic entropy.
Okay, I'm starting to wrap my head around this.
Yeah.
But if everything is predetermined, doesn't that make the universe feel kind of static? Like watching a movie for the second time, knowing every plot twist.
That's a question that often comes up. And it's true. In a simple system, knowing the initial conditions might let you predict the future perfectly. But the universe, it's anything but simple.
Right. We're talking about a system with more stars than grains of sand on all the beaches on Earth.
Exactly. So even if everything is deterministic, the sheer complexity of those interactions, all those tiny events influencing each other, well, it creates a kind of emergent randomness. Think of it like the weather.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. We can't predict exactly where each raindrop will fall, but we can understand the larger weather pattern.
Precisely. And this is where things get really interesting because even within a deterministic system, if it's complex enough, you can still have surprise and novelty. In fact, there's this fascinating thought experiment, the 100 prisoners problem.
Oh, I've heard of that one. It's about those prisoners who have to find their own number in a bunch of boxes, right? Sounds impossible.
It does, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. There's a strategy based on understanding the underlying order of the problem that gives them a surprisingly good chance of success.
So even though the numbers are seemingly random, there's a hidden structure, a pattern they can exploit.
Exactly. And that's what deterministic entropy is all about, looking for those hidden patterns, that underlying order, even in the things that seem completely random. It's a whole different way of looking at the universe, and it has some pretty mind-blowing implications.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. So how does this deterministic entropy actually play out on a cosmic scale? We're not just talking about predicting coin flips here, right?
No, we're talking about the fundamental forces that shape reality itself. And one of the most intriguing aspects of this deterministic view is how it challenges our usual understanding of entropy. You see, we usually think of entropy as disorder, as things falling apart, right?
Right, like my desk after a long day of work.
Exactly. But what if entropy, at its core, is actually a measure of information? What if it's not about disorder, but about the sheer volume of information woven into the very fabric of reality?
Okay, so it's not about a messy desk, but more like a library full of books being more complex than a single sheet of paper.
Exactly. It's like a cosmic logbook, constantly being updated with every interaction, every event, no matter how small. And this ever-growing tapestry of information, that's what we perceive as increasing entropy.
Okay, that makes sense, but here's where I get tripped up. Doesn't information usually bring order to things? Like knowing the rules of a game makes it less random, not more.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But think of it this way. Every time something interacts with something else, every time an event occurs, it generates information. It's like the universe is constantly taking notes, documenting its own existence.
So the more things happen, the more information exists, and the higher the entropy.
You got it. And this is where things start to get really mind-bending. Because if we think of entropy as information, it opens up this whole other way of looking at the relationship between the physical world and something we usually think of as separate consciousness.
Here's where it gets personal. You're saying there might be a connection between the universe's information and our own conscious experience.
Well, it's a bold idea, one that some physicists are really starting to grapple with. In fact, there's one physicist in particular, Shiva Meucci, who's really pushing the boundaries on this. He argues that our current understanding of physics, with its emphasis on randomness and probability, is just scratching the surface.
Shiva Meucci, interesting. Before we dive into his work, can you tell us a bit more about who he is?
Sure. He's a fascinating guy, a real polymath, actually. A physicist, artist, and independent researcher, Shiva isn't afraid to ask the big, mind-bending questions.
So he's not afraid to challenge the status quo.
Yep.
I like it. What is it about Shiva's approach that makes him particularly equipped to tackle such a complex topic?
Well, for one thing, he's incredibly well-versed in a wide range of fields. He seamlessly blends concepts from physics, information theory, and even philosophy. He doesn't shy away from exploring unconventional ideas.
It's like he's looking for those connections, those hidden patterns that everyone else might be missing.
Exactly. He's not afraid to dig into obscure theories or re-examine old experiments with a fresh perspective.
Now, you mentioned Shiva sees a link between information, entropy, and consciousness. That's a pretty big leap for most people. How does he even begin to explain that connection? How can something as intangible as consciousness arise from the physical world?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And Shiva's view is that the key to understanding this lies in recognizing that information isn't just some abstract thing, it's a force, a real force that shapes the universe.
Okay, hold on. Information as a force. That sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. How can something intangible like that have a real physical effect on the world?
Well, think about it this way. We know energy is a force, right? It can move things, change things, create things. And information, Shiva argues, is intimately linked to energy. In fact, he believes that information can actually guide and direct the flow of energy.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So it's like information is the blueprint and energy is the construction crew.
That's a great way to put it. And to see how this might work in practice, let's consider a classic thought experiment. Maxwell's demon. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, vaguely. It's that tiny demon who can supposedly cheat the laws of thermodynamics, right?
That's the one. So imagine this little demon controlling a tiny door between two chambers of gas. When a fast-moving molecule approaches, he opens the door and lets it through to one side. When a slow-moving molecule approaches, he lets it through to the other.
So he's basically sorting the hot molecules from the cold ones.
Exactly. And over time, you'd end up with one chamber getting hotter and the other getting colder, which seems to violate the second law of thermodynamics, which says that entropy or disorder always increases in a closed system.
So is this little demon actually breaking the laws of physics?
Well, not quite. The catch is that the demon himself needs to use energy to operate that door and keep track of all those molecules. He's processing information. So even though it seems like he's cheating, he's actually just shifting entropy around.
So the demon isn't breaking the rules, he's bending them by using information as a tool.
Exactly. And that's the key point here. Even in this thought experiment, information isn't just some passive thing. It has real consequences for the system. It can be used to manipulate energy to create order.
Okay, I get it. But we're talking about a tiny demon here. How does this scale up to the entire universe?
Now imagine that same principle, but writ large across the cosmos. Shiva proposes that the universe itself is like a giant information processing system, and that the intricate structures we see, galaxies, stars, planets, might be the result of this information-energy interplay over billions of years.
So you're saying that information isn't just something we've invented, it's baked into the fabric of reality, shaping the universe at the most fundamental level.
Exactly. And this is where his concept of deterministic entropy comes in. It's not just about things falling apart. It's about information shaping how things come together, how energy flows and organizes itself.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get the hang of this. But where does consciousness fit into all of this? Are we just talking about a really complex computer program?
That's where Shiva's view gets even more radical. He doesn't see consciousness as just an emergent property of complex systems like some happy accident. He sees it as fundamental, woven into the fabric of reality itself.
Okay, now you've really lost me. How can consciousness be fundamental? It seems like it's something that arises from the brain, from matter.
That's the common view, but Shiva challenges that. He suggests that our brains aren't creating consciousness. They're more like receivers, tuned to this universal information field that permeates everything.
So it's like our brains are picking up on some kind of cosmic broadcast.
In a way, yes. And because this information field is fundamentally interconnected, it means that consciousness isn't confined to our heads. It's part of this larger web that connects everything in the universe.
Okay, that's a pretty mind-blowing idea.
Mm.
But it also seems like a huge departure from the way we typically view the world, this very materialistic perspective where consciousness is just a product of the brain.
It is a huge shift. It's about moving from a view of the universe as a collection of inert objects to a universe that's fundamentally interconnected, alive with information and possibility. And it's a shift that Shiva believes is essential if we want to truly understand the nature of reality and our place within it.
Okay, I'm starting to see why Shiva Meucci is considered such a radical thinker. He's not just tweaking the edges of our current understanding, he's proposing a whole new paradigm, one where information is king and consciousness is a fundamental aspect of reality. But if everything in the universe is determined by this information field, as he says, how does free will factor into all of this? Do we even have free will in Shiva's model?
This is one of the biggest challenges to the idea of a deterministic universe and where Shiva's concept of paracausality comes into play.
Paracausality, that sounds intimidating.
It's a mouthful, isn't it? But it's actually a very elegant idea. Think of it like this. We tend to see cause and effect as linear, right? A leads to B leads to C,
Right,
and so
the
on.
classic domino effect.
Exactly. But paracausality suggests that the web of cause and effect is far more intricate, more interconnected than we can possibly imagine. It's not just a straight line of dominoes, it's a vast, multidimensional network of influences that extends far beyond our immediate awareness.
Okay, so it's like saying that even the smallest action can have ripple effects that we might never even be aware of.
Exactly. And this is where free will comes in, according to Shiva. It's not about making choices in isolation. It's about navigating this infinitely complex web of influences. Our actions have real consequences, but those consequences are shaped by a symphony of factors that are beyond our comprehension.
So it's like we're all playing our parts in this grand cosmic drama, but we don't have the full script. We can improvise, make choices, but those choices are always interacting with a web of influences that we can't fully grasp.
Exactly. And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of Shiva's work. His exploration of how this deterministic, information-driven view of the universe might actually manifest in the physical world. He's particularly interested in two areas: the way the brain stores information and that infamous Michelson-Morley experiment.
Okay, now we're talking. Let's start with the brain. If our consciousness is part of this universal information field, as Shiva suggests, how does our gray matter actually interact with it? How does it tap into that cosmic network? So how does he think this universal information field connects to our brains? It's not like we've got USB ports back there.
Right. It's definitely not that straightforward. But Shiva suggests that we might be thinking about information storage in the brain all wrong. You see, we tend to picture the brain like a computer, with memories neatly stored in specific locations, like files and folders.
Yeah, it makes sense
right?
to me. You find the right folder, you find the memory.
Right, but Shiva suggests a more holistic model, drawing inspiration from, you guessed it, holograms.
Holograms, those things where you can see the whole image from any angle.
Exactly. Remember, even if you break a hologram into pieces, each piece still contains the whole image. So Shiva's proposing that our memories might not be localized to specific neurons or synapses, but rather encoded in the overall patterns of activity across the entire brain.
So instead of looking for a specific file, it's like the whole brain is involved in remembering.
Exactly. It's less like a filing cabinet and more like a symphony, where the meaning isn't in the individual notes, but in the melody they create together. Each memory is a unique symphony of brain activity.
Okay, that's a really cool way to think about it. But if that's the case, how do we ever pull out a specific memory? How does the brain know which symphony to play?
And that's where Shiva's idea of resonance gets really interesting. He suggests that retrieving a memory isn't about finding it in a specific location, but about recreating a specific pattern of neural activity that resonates with the encoded information.
Okay, so it's less like searching for a file on a hard drive and more like striking a tuning fork and making a specific note resonate. The right trigger, whether it's a scent, a song, or his feeling, activates a corresponding pattern in the brain, and boom, the memory comes flooding back.
That's a great way to put it. And this model could help explain why our memories are often so fluid and interconnected, triggered by seemingly random cues. It's because our brains are constantly seeking meaningful connections, resonating with patterns in the information field.
So our memories aren't isolated events. They're part of a dynamic, interconnected web. It's an elegant idea, but how does this holographic brain model connect back to Shiva's bigger picture of a deterministic clockwork universe?
Well, think about it. If our brains are essentially holographic receivers tuned to this universal information field, it suggests that consciousness isn't confined to our heads. It becomes a fundamental aspect of reality itself, woven into the very fabric of the cosmos. We're not just isolated beings, we're all interconnected parts of this grand information exchange.
So it's not that the brain is generating consciousness. It's more like the brain is a receiver and consciousness is the signal.
Exactly. And by tapping into this universal information field, we gain access to a level of knowledge and awareness that goes far beyond our individual experiences. It's a pretty awe-inspiring concept when you think about it.
It really is.
Yeah.
But how could we even begin to test something like that scientifically? How can you measure or quantify a universal information field?
Right. It's definitely not easy. It would require a whole new approach to neuroscience, one that combines advanced brain imaging techniques with insights from quantum mechanics and information theory.
It's like we're trying to understand the software of consciousness by studying the hardware of the brain, but with this added twist that the software might actually be running on a cosmic scale. That's mind-boggling.
It really is. And speaking of mind-boggling, this leads us to another intriguing piece of evidence that Shiva points to, something that relates to this idea of a universal information field, the Michelson-Morley experiment.
The Michelson-Morley experiment. That's the one that supposedly disproved the existence of the luminiferous ether, right? That mysterious substance that physicists used to believe light waves traveled through.
You got it. And for a long time, that experiment was seen as the nail in the coffin for the ether theory. But Shiva suggests that we might have been too quick to dismiss the ether, and the Michelson-Morley experiment might not be the slam dunk it's often portrayed as.
Hold on a minute. Are you saying that the ether might actually exist? That 19th century physics might have been onto something?
Well, Shiva's suggesting it's worth taking another look. He draws on a little-known branch of physics called rotationally elastic ether theory, which proposes that the ether isn't some static, rigid substance like physicists originally imagined. Instead, it's a dynamic, fluid-like medium, almost like a cosmic ocean that's incredibly sensitive to information.
Okay, so imagine a giant ocean, but instead of water, it's this ether stuff, and it can actually sense and respond to what's happening within it.
Precisely. Now, I know this is getting pretty far out there, but it's a testament to Shiva's creativity and his willingness to challenge conventional thinking.
Absolutely. He's asking us to consider the possibility that there's a whole lot more going on than we can currently perceive or measure. It's like he's saying, hey, we might be missing a huge piece of the puzzle here.
Exactly. And the most exciting part is if we can somehow find a way to test these ideas, to peek behind the curtain of what we think we know, it could revolutionize our understanding of the universe and our place within it.
So what are the key takeaways here? Where does Shiva Meucci's work leave us? It's a lot to process.
Well, for me, it all boils down to this. Shiva is challenging us to take information seriously, not just as some abstract concept, but as a fundamental force shaping the universe alongside gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear forces. He's urging us to see the universe not as a collection of inert objects, but as a dynamic network of information, a place where consciousness is woven into the very fabric of existence.
It's a powerful vision, and one that has profound implications for how we understand ourselves and our place in the cosmos. If Shiva's right, it means that we're not just observers in a meaningless universe. We're active participants in an ongoing story of cosmic creation and evolution. And that story, my friends, is far from over.
Well said. And to our listeners, keep asking those big questions, keep pushing the boundaries of knowledge, and most importantly, keep exploring those mind-bending corners of the universe. We'll be here with you every step of the way.